Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel Risk Modeling Hub. Today is day 13 of our 100 Days of ECL Mastery series. Today we'll be exploring the economic indicators and the macroeconomic variables that drive the expected loss calculation. So ECL isn't built in isolation. It's powered by the real world economic data, things like GDP, growth rate, interest rates and the consumer price indices. And these are the fundamental drivers that tell us when borrowers are more likely to default. So, let me tell you, if you are new to my channel, I create easy to understand educational content on credit risk modeling and validation, Basel, IFRS, and machine learning, and career guidance to help both the beginners and experienced professionals build successful careers in banking and analytics. So, please take a moment to subscribe to my channel and don't forget to press the bell icon so you never miss my future videos. Also, if you have any questions or suggestions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll answer them. In this series on the ECL, PD, LGD, and EAD models, I'll show you exactly how to select, test, and integrate the right economic indicators into your framework. So let's get started. So, under the IFRS 9, credit losses aren't just about the individual borrowers. They are fundamentally driven by the macroeconomic conditions. Think of GDP growth as a leading indicator. So, when the economy slows, default rates spike, recovery diminish, and loss rate rise across your entire portfolio. But here's the key, not all economic variables matter equally. You need to identify which one truly moves the needle for your specific business. Statistical testing helps you separate this signal from the noise. So you are only modeling what actually drives your losses. And the banks use forward looking macroeconomic variables in their ECL models, which are more accurate. On an average, GDP sensitivity ranges from 3 to 7% during the downturns, and that's material. So, building the macro ECL connection isn't the optional, it's essential for the realistic credit risk modeling. Under the IFRS 9, your ECL calculation must reflect a probability weighted blend of multiple macroeconomic paths, not just one optimistic view. So, consensus forecasts are your baseline view. These are published macroeconomic projections from the central banks, the IMF, or the Bloomberg consensus data. Assume the normal economic condition. So, the stress scenarios, these are different. They are the hypothetical but plausible adverse conditions that test your portfolio against the tail risk. The events consensus doesn't anticipate, right? And here's the key insight. The consensus and the stress scenarios, they serve different purpose and often point in opposite direction. So for example, consensus shows the ECL improvement at plus 2.1%, while the 2023 stress test revealed the deterioration at minus 3.5%. So don't rely on the consensus alone. Your ECL framework must weight both the baseline and the adverse scenarios, and this is how you build a forward-looking credible model that captures the real economic risk. Now, every credible ECL model needs three core macroeconomic variables, and we call them the Trinity. So, first is the GDP, the real GDP growth, and this is the primary driver of the economic health. GDP is statistically the most significant variable in credit models, and when GDP declines, the defaults accelerate, and the relationship is non-linear, meaning the losses don't just go up gradually, they spike sharply. Second is the unemployment rate. This impacts both the households and the corporations. When the unemployment rises, mortgage default increase, secured lending suffers, and the corporate demand destruction flows. Right? And this sensitivity is real, typically ranging from plus 40 to plus 60 basis points. Third is the credit spreads. While GDP and unemployment move together with the cycle, the credit spread move differently. Spreads widen during the stress, signaling the market price fix, and they feed a 5 to 6 month early warning signal into your model. Spreads tighten and widen months before actually defaults materialize. So at the bottom, we show the quantitative bridge, the macro adjusted PD formula. Your baseline PD gets adjusted by the coefficients tied to the changes in the GDP, unemployment, and the spread. So this Trinity approach ensures your ECL model captures a full economic cycle and it's statistically significant and regulatory accepted. Now let's walk through the complete pipeline. How you take the published macroeconomic forecast and turn them into probability weighted ECL provision. So first you need to gather the baseline forecast. Start with the consensus data from the central banks, the IMF or the Bloomberg, or maybe from your internal economics team. You need 5 to 10 years of the forward projection for the GDP, unemployment and the credit spread. Then you need to define the three scenarios, the upside, base, and the downside, right? And then calibrate the PD. Apply the sensitivity coefficients from the historical calibration. Then compute the ECL for each of the three paths, compute the loss expectation. And then the probability weight. Here's the IFRS 9 requirement is that you need to combine all the three scenarios using the probability weights. So don't just use the baseline, weight them based on the likelihood. So for instance, 50% for the baseline, 25% for the upside, or 20% for the upside, 50, 25, 25, right? You can do that. So this is how you need to figure it out. The example shows illustrates a baseline PD of say 1.20%, adjust upwards to 1.174, 1.71 or 74% under the weighted scenarios, right? So from base 1.2, it draws up to 1.74%. The key takeaway here is that every ECL provision must be supported by documented scenario assumptions, calibrated provisions, and audit-ready spreadsheets. And that's what regulators expect from you. Now, the sensitivity analysis. This is how you prove your ECL model, how it actually works. It answers the critical question. If GDP declines by 1%, how much does your portfolio rise? Right? Portfolio ECL. And here, the IFRS 9 mandates you disclose these sensitivities. So, first understand the sensitivity coefficient matrix. On the left, this shows the elasticity, the percentage change in the ECL for each macro shock. So, look this table carefully. A 1% of the GDP growth. This GDP growth shocks, if you see at 1% GDP growth, this decreases the total ECL by 2.7%, minus 2.7 if you can see. And conversely, a minus 1% of GDP shock increases the ECL by plus 3.7%. So have you noticed the asymmetry? Losses don't respond this symmetrically to positive and negative shocks. 100 basis point unemployment increases drives the defaults by plus 2%. If you can see 100 basis point of unemployment in the column second, row third, column second, right? And 100 basis point of we have seen by the plus 2%, but 100 basis point decrease only reduces it by 1.3%. Similarly, you can see the tornado chart as well, which shocks the biggest impact and the GDP dominate. Basically, all what we are doing is we are visualizing what the sensitivity, how 1% down or the basis change in plus and minus, how it is impacting on the ECL, and that's the various ways that we have done, right? So sensitivity analysis isn't just optional, it's your proof that the model is forward looking, that you understand how the economic shocks transmit into the credit losses. Regulators will ask for it. So if you look at the blue box, the severely adverse scenario at the bottom, it combines multiple shocks simultaneously, right? 3.7% of the GDP, then 3.3% of the credit spreads, right? And then and also the accumulation of the unemployment as well. So if you can see that it is giving you the 23% of the jump, and this is your stress test outcome, and it must be documented. Also, the portfolio elasticity benchmarks onto the right, 2 to 3% of the mortgage or the unemployment. Household income risk drivers the loss severity, 4 to 5% for the corporates, right? So high GDP sensitivity signals a pro-cyclical portfolio. It invites Basel III stress test scrutiny. I know that it's sounding a bit tough, but at least go through this, you will gradually understand. Now here's one of the biggest debates in ECL modeling. Should your probability of default reflect the today economic condition, or should it smooth across the full economic cycle? And this is the PIT versus the TTC dilemma. We have discussed it in the past as well. So if you haven't watched my previous videos yet, please check out the playlist in the description, right? Or you can check out my channel as well. So I'll quickly go through what the TTC and PIT here it means and what I really want to say. So TTC averages the default probability across a full 8 to 10 years of the economic cycle, and the idea is to smoothen the business cycle volatility. long-term historical average regardless of today's conditions, right? And the point in time PD, it reflects the current and the near-term credit conditions. IFRS 9 mandates the PIT because accounting standards prioritize the fair value representation at the reporting date, right? So if you look at the chart below, it shows the tension visually. TTC stays flat through the cycle while PIT oscillates with the economy. During recession, PIT shoots up to a very high pitch, right? But TTC still remains stable. And during the expansion, PIT drops, but TTC still stays constant. So you use TTC as your baseline, but then adjust it with the macro index that reflects the current conditions. We'll see that in the upcoming examples as well. Not in today's video, but in the upcoming videos I've definitely planned. So first I want you to understand the theoretical portion, what the connections are and what exactly are we trying to understand in this, and then we'll see through the example. So don't worry regarding that. So PIT volatility is acceptable if downturns are anticipated 12 plus months in advance. Forward-looking scenarios are the mitigation. Now, your ECL model is only as credible as the scenarios feeding into it. This slide shows how to build a defensible macro scenario library that will survive the regulatory scrutiny. Right? So first is the data sources and the hierarchy. So it is from the central bank's forecast, the highest authority. The Fed, ECB projections, BOE inflation rates, they publish quarterly and carry regulatory weight. Then as we discussed, the consensus data providers from the Bloombergs, Reuters, and the mean median across the 15 to 50 plus of the sell sides. Third, your own internal economics team from the competitive edge and the portfolio specific adjustments. And fourth, the market implied forecast from the futures, CDS indices, option implied volatility, etc. Then the scenario forecast table. Now you build your 3 scenario grid, base case, upside and the downside, and show 4 to 5 years of forward with internally consistent paths, right? And then the scenario narratives. What exactly the base case, upside and downside is telling to you after your analysis. Then the audit trail comes up as a fourth step where all scenarios are documented with approval signatures, sources of each forecast component, date of the forecast collection, bank specific adjustments made, risk management approval on record, quarterly review or update schedule, or the prior forecast versus the actual accuracy track, right? And last is the validation, which is against the regulatory stress test. Scenario must encompass each and every the Fed, CCAR, severely adverse and the EV stress testing scenarios, right? So you need to update quarterly. Approval should be there at the risk committee and retain the signed evidence. That's important for the future monitoring purposes. Now, here's the critical truth. Macro elasticities, these are not universal. A GDP shock doesn't hit your residential mortgage portfolio the same way it hits your corporate lending book. So let's first discuss the residential mortgage, the first box. These are primarily driven by the unemployment, like household lose jobs, they stop paying mortgages. Unemployment elasticity ranges from minus 0.1 to minus 0.8 of basis points per 1% of the unemployment rise. I know that it's too much of the data to digest, too much of the criticality to understand. But please trust me, once you go through this and in the upcoming videos, you'll understand through examples as well. You will relate what exactly I am trying to tell you here with the when we do the PD model development. This all the concepts will come there. So please go with me and try to understand each terms and relate through the examples. Okay. Commercial real estate. It responds to real GDP growth like tenant demand, rental income, property valuations all move with the economic cycles. Then comes the corporate lending. This is GDP dominant but also spread sensitive. Like real GDP growth can be from minus 0.5 to minus 0.6. This is something that I had seen when I was working with the data. Credit spreads, interest rates, all these are the ranges that where this actually falls, right? And also the portfolio level blended ECL, which is formula at the bottom. It shows you the weight, each macro sensitivity. So if 40% is for the residential one, the mortgages, 25% is for the commercial real estate, CRE, 20% for the CRE, 25% for the corporate lending, and 15% for the consumer credit, the last segment, right? So you blend the GDP elasticity base becomes a weighted average and not the corporate elasticity alone. So that's your portfolio level blended ECL, where you have encompass all the different segments. So portfolio mix determines the macro sensitivity. It's not a model parameter, it's an architecture choice. Always reconcile portfolio level elasticity to segment the level drives before defending it to your auditors, right? And here's the core problem every ECL modeler face. Your historical data is 5 to 10 years old, but your macro scenarios extend 5 to 10 years forward. So, how do you use the past relationships to predict the future sensitivity? Have you ever thought about that? And this is where many models fail under the stress. So, first, you need to understand the core regression model, the historical default rates on the macro variable, the statistical foundation where you have the default rate fitted is equal to alpha plus beta of coefficient into the GDP plus beta of that into unemployment plus beta of that into that spread and plus the error term, right? And first approach is the regression based sensitivity. It is most common, and here you run the OLS regression on the historical data, extract the coefficients and apply them forward. And the next approach is the stress calibration, where you uses only the recession period data, downturns, borrower stress, margin compression, right? And third approach is the econometric modeling, which uses the VAR or the structural models with leading indicators, lagged relationships, and non-linear PD amplifications in deep recession. So you need to first start with the regression as default and overlay stress calibrated overrides during the downturns, validate with the econometric models, right? I know it sounds a bit tough, but as we progress along in the series, we'll see everything. So don't worry, right? Common pitfalls something like look back bias from using only the benign history, structural breaks when regulations change underwriting standards, correlation breakdowns when spreads and GDP decouple, and overfitting when you add too many variables to chase the R square, right? So the interview can question at the end, which captures the real challenge, like your GDP elasticity is minus 1.4, but then how do you estimate it? And if you say just the regression alone, then pushback will come. And if you show the stress testing, benchmarking, and multi-method validation, you then win the credibility. And that's the difference between a model that passes and one that survives the default, right? Now, ECL models are not set and forget. A model calibrated in 2022 during the low inflation and strong employment is dangerously stale in the 2024 to 25 when conditions have shifted dramatically. So, regular mandate the timely updates when economic conditions warrant. And this is your operational governance framework. So you need to build the monthly monitoring dashboard where you have your variables and what kind of forecast and with respect to the actual in the different quarters. What are you observing and how much is the variance and in which direction, whether it's going in an optimistic direction or is it going in a worse direction. You have to document everything. Then comes the recalibration triggers, which comes in two flavors. Automatic triggers, they fire without the debate, right? And then there are discretionary triggers, which requires the expert judgment, right? So in this, the sector deterioration when say the commercial real estate spread widen beyond the model assumptions. Underwriting changes when the policy shifts, or there may be peer signals like competitors reporting materially through different ECL trajectories. And in the automatic one, GDP shock, right? If it is happening, it actually differs from the forecast by let's say greater than 1%. If you have any cuts or so, it can tell you. Then there can be the red box on the right. If you see, it captures the mandate. You have to recalibrate when the economic conditions materially change, right? That's a mandate. Or risk regulation escalation. Banks caught running these stale or the backdated models, it faced the enforcement actions. So your control framework must be designed around the continuous governance and not the annual reviews. Monthly monitoring, quarterly variance analysis, and triggered recalibration workflows are the table stakes. And that's how you keep your ECL credible. So you have to follow the recalibration process, which is documented as a 6-step workflow. First, you need to gather the data where you collect the latest macro or the default or the LTP data and refresh the regression datasets and document the sources under dashboards. Then you rerun the calibration exercise where you re-estimate the regression and produce the updated beta coefficients and compare to the prior vintage. Then you assess the change, be it quarterly, materially, and you investigate why this change is happening. And then you validate how you backtest on the 2008 crisis, then peer benchmarking, and then you submit to the model governance committee, right? And then you document and sign off, explaining why this has happened, what are the reasons, and then from the sign off from the model owner or the CRO or the CFO. And then you notify the audit and the regulators. Last and the most important, once everything is done, you deploy and quantify. You push to ECL engine and recompute the next quarter or the quarter 4 report, and where you mention how much the basis points has been increased from the recalibration, increase or decrease. The purpose is to increase, but what exactly you are reporting, you should document it from the last stage, from the deployment stage. So you have just completed the day 13 of the 100 days of ECL mastery series, and you have moved from the theory to the implementation. Now let's recap what you have mastered and what's coming next. So 6 things you have mastered today. First is the macro ECL linkage. You now understand how the GDP, unemployment, and the credit spreads they drive the PD, LGD, and EAD through the documented economic channels. Second is the scenario frameworks, where you can build the probability weighted base, upside and the downside scenarios. This reflects both the consensus, expectations, and the regulatory stress conditions. Third is the PIT versus the PTC philosophy. So basically IFRS 9 mandates the point in time parameters. So volatility is appropriate, but it is the forward looking anticipation which prevents the procyclicality. Then comes the portfolio specific calibration, like the mortgage unemployment elasticity is never equal to the CRE GDP elasticity. Then comes the calibration rigor, right? You can run the regression based stress calibrated and the econometric validation approaches, right? And then you can defend them as well. Sixth is the continuous monitoring, like you have built a monthly dashboard tracking forecast accuracy and recalibration triggers. So this is the differentiator. It separates the junior modelers from the seasoned risk professionals, right? If you have all the concepts clear in your mind, then you can excel. And every coefficient needs a source and a validation. Every scenario needs a narrative and an approval signature. Every recalibration also needs the documented triggers and the governance sign-off, right? So we have seen the 100 days of ECL mastery, and day 14 the next will shift towards the portfolio segmentation for ECL. I have seen that there are confusions regarding the segmentation part, how the retail, corporate, and SME works. We'll discuss that. And if you have found today's video useful, and I believe if you have learned something new or if you have seen something new, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel, Risk Modeling Hub, so you don't miss any future episodes of this series. And if you have any questions or feedbacks, or if there is any specific topic you would like me to cover next, please let me know in the comments. I read every comment and would like to hear from you. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.